Indeed, the European neighbourhood policy was launched 20 years ago as a one-size-fits-all comprehensive policy for the eastern and southern neighbourhood. Having said that, the policy, how it was launched 2 decades ago, is very different from how it functions now. So we've seen incremental changes and revisions, and de facto much greater demand-driven policy. At the beginning, it was really about the supply from the EU, what the EU wanted to achieve. And there has been a bit of reality check in terms of what is needed and what is demanded from the neighboring countries. So we, in practice, de facto, we've seen much greater differentiation to the point that we have the European neighbourhood policy, but what it really offers, it's a bit of tapas menu for the countries depending on their needs and aspirations. So it's an umbrella policy which really helps for the EU to engage with the neighbours, but in what way, to what extent, with which actors inside the countries. This varies massively from Azerbaijan to Morocco. So yeah, the policy is in place, but de facto it is a very different type of instrument that we've had when it started. The Eastern neighbourhood has basically 2 layers of policy. One is the European neighbourhood policy, which is from the legal point of view a set of bilateral relations. And then we had a regional initiative, the Eastern Partnership, which is a soft law policy. It doesn't have any grounding in existing sort of treaties, and it's more a regional cooperation forum, which has, despite being known in the Eastern Partnership, has really not been as successful as bilateral relations. So from that point of view, the Eastern Partnership is an amalgam of all bilateral relations. And now, so we have already this a bit of complexity and ambiguity in the Eastern neighborhood. And now, obviously, with Moldova, Ukraine, and Georgia being recognized as candidate states, we have this splintering of the Eastern neighborhood becoming much more evident. And yet, perhaps surprisingly, that doesn't mean the end of the Eastern Partnership and of the Eastern neighborhood policy, because we still have, out of 6 neighboring countries, we have 3 which don't have membership perspective or aspirations, which means they are becoming a bit of, if we scrap the neighborhood policy and the Eastern Partnership, they become a bit sort of homeless. So we have a real challenge what to do with the 3 countries, Belarus, Armenia, and Azerbaijan. And there is, at the moment, there is this preference for keeping both the ENP, but especially the soft sort of umbrella mapped onto the ENP, the Eastern Partnership, just to provide that common space for discussion and cooperation. So there are obviously big differences and challenges, but what we see is the convergence between southern and eastern neighborhood in terms of realization that conflicts, wars, and security are of a fundamental ontological importance for the countries in order for the EU to be more effective with its broadly defined developmental and modernization agenda. So this is, paradoxically, we've got much more convergence between the 2 neighborhoods, despite all the differences. I think the ENP is like a sort of welcoming, sort of like a gateway to studying the countries. And from an academic point of view, we've certainly seen in many EU member states this prioritization of main disciplines, politics, international relations, or history, for example, and a decline what we call area studies, when academics and experts have really developed this deep expertise, ranging from languages, knowing history, knowing societies, and politics. So for me, the main value of the neighborhood policy, it's not only studying the EU as a foreign policy actor, because it's a splendid opportunity to study the EU, how it's from the lofty objections and talking about values and principle and aspirations, how they become operationalized via various policies and instruments, and how they are actually implemented and received by the partner countries. And this is where this area studies expertise, that we cannot talk about Morocco and EU without actually understanding all the issues in Morocco or in Armenia in order to understand why and to what extent they become receptive and engage with various sort of instruments, with various policies that the EU offers. So for me, the value added of the European neighbourhood policy is that it allows us to tackle both the EU, study the EU, but ultimately we cannot explain the EU, the European neighbourhood policy, without actually talking about the target countries. And it's a lesson in humbleness and in doing our homework when it comes to understanding the countries we are dealing with. I have to say that's my first attendance, participation, and I'm so impressed. And I have to say a tad envious as well, that you have this wonderful community and being supported and bringing people together. And in terms of quality of understanding, I feel at home because I know I am amongst the people I know that they know. And for me, that's the trademark of quality. But also having this sense of community and, coming from the Eastern neighborhood, it's wonderful to feel so included and practicing the values of inclusiveness. And so I'm very envious also because we lack it when it comes to the Eastern Partnership. We have no similar equivalent that academics and experts and policymakers come together. So I think I would really like Euromesco and AI to be made to be copied for the Eastern Partnership because it is really best practice from that point of view. So I've learned a lot, and I think this is what those conferences are about: empowering people, motivating, but also exchanging ideas. And I really feel a gap when it comes to it in the Eastern Partnership.